I've heard that several of you are dealing with imposter syndrome in addition to your blushing, and it's making you feel stressed and anxious and inadequate at your work or at school. And you're always just thinking like about these uncomfortable situations coming up, and you just don't feel right. You don't feel like your true, authentic self. You feel like there's just so much you're worried about. You have this image that you're trying to portray, and you just can't seem to keep up. At least that's my experience with imposter syndrome. And so I wanted to share with you my approach for getting rid of imposter syndrome, and how I prevent myself from ever getting into it ever again. And so, if you don't know who I am, my name is Colin Clem. I dealt with excessive blushing over 6 years ago now. I overcame it without using therapy, medication, surgery, or anything like that. I suffered from it for 10 years beforehand. And now I teach other people how to overcome it as well, how to overcome that fear and embarrassment around the excessive blushing so they're not living in constant anxiety. And I run a coaching program to help you do it much faster, easier, and more enjoyable than trying to do it on your own. So I always have a link below these videos and in the show notes of these Spotify episodes if you're listening to this. So you can always book a call with me if you want to learn more about my coaching program and just get this done and over with if you're dealing with excessive blushing. Now, I know this video in particular isn't exactly about blushing, but I thought it was still worthy of making a video about it, at least a quick one, because I find that many of you are dealing with imposter syndrome. And it got me thinking, like, is there a correlation between this blushing and imposter syndrome? Are these linked in any way? And I have come to the conclusion that they are. And I will share that in a second. I think they both have the same root cause. This fear and embarrassment around blushing and imposter syndrome have the same root cause. Okay. And I'll get to that in a second. But first, let's define what imposter syndrome is. If you've seen any of my videos, you know I love defining terms because you need to be on the same page of what we're talking about if we're going to start, working on a solution. So, what is imposter syndrome? I believe, from my perspective, that imposter syndrome occurs when you have two variables. Okay, it occurs when the expectation of you, I'm writing this down, expectation is higher, when the expectation of you is higher than your ability. Okay, so as you can see on the board here, we have this, on the y-axis we have results. Basically, the results that you think you are able to produce are lower than what you believe is expected of you. And that's what creates imposter syndrome, is this feeling. It's actually more of a perception. It's not even true exactly. It's you perceive that the expectations of you are higher than what you are capable of delivering. Okay, that is where imposter syndrome comes from. And it could be for a specific project that you're working on where you feel imposter syndrome. It could be even greater than that. It could be just in your overall role. Like maybe you've stepped into a role where you think the expectations of you in that role are higher than what you're capable of delivering. Okay. And I think there's three instances that can create this imposter syndrome. So here's when it happens. It happens when you have unclear expectations. Okay, I see this one pretty often. This is what has happened to me in the past, is I would be assigned something with super vague directions or I'd get super vague feedback on how I'm doing. And so I really have no clue on what the expectations are and if I'm meeting them or if I'm surpassing them or if I'm under them. I'm just like not even sure. And that is a situation where you will feel imposter syndrome if you don't even know what is required of you or what others expect of you. Okay, so that is the first one. It can also happen when you have unclear abilities, when you're not even sure what you're capable of. So this might happen if you're doing something for the first time and you really don't know what you're getting yourself into. That's a very common one as well. And you just aren't sure if you can do it, right? So that's another situation where you will feel imposter syndrome. And the third time that you will feel imposter syndrome is you might have very clear expectations. You might have a very clear idea of your ability, but you're not being honest. You're not being honest about the gap that exists. Okay. So I'll write down, you have a clear gap. There's a clear gap between what you're capable of and what the expectations are. And you are not speaking up. Okay. You are not being honest. Okay. So clear gap, but no honesty. Those are the times when imposter syndrome can occur, at least in my experience. So this third one's really dangerous because this is when you're almost, it can either happen when you're blatantly lying, when you're like, yeah, I can do that, and you know you haven't been able to, or that you can't, or two, when somebody assigns something to you and you just kind of accept it, you just kind of go along with it, and you never speak up about the fact that you don't think you can do this. That is another super common one that creates imposter syndrome. But essentially, it's one of those. You either have unclear expectations and you think they're higher than what you're capable of. You have unclear ability, meaning you've never done it before, and you just don't even know if you can meet the expectations. You just have no reference point. And three, it can happen when you know the expectations and you know what you're capable of, and you know you cannot meet those expectations, and you're not speaking up. You're not saying anything about that fact. You're not being honest. Okay. So that is how imposter syndrome occurs. And I think that the bigger this gap is, the worse that you feel. So the higher the expectations are above your current ability, the worse that your imposter syndrome feels. And there's also a component on who is you are going to be letting down as well. You might feel more imposter syndrome when it's like something that's that could be very impactful on your career or on your well-being, and you're afraid to let this person down or whatever. Like you think they mean a lot to you, or this project means a lot to you, or this role means a lot to you, and that will also dramatically cause that imposter syndrome to feel worse and to increase your worry in your everyday life. So how is this linked to blushing? Okay, I want to kind of go over that for a second. So I think that the reason that it's common for blushers to experience imposter syndrome is because they both have the same root cause. Okay, they both come from this root cause of simply a fear of judgment. That's all it is. And you know what I'll say about this is that fear of judgment isn't that bad. Like everybody has some fear of judgment. We as humans, we are programmed to be social beings. We are afraid to be ostracized or outcast or, shunned from a group of people. And that is a survival mechanism. That's because if we were solo in wherever we were living as early humans, you'd basically be dead because you can't survive on your own. I mean, you can, but it's like extremely difficult. It's much easier to survive in a group that you can work with. And it's also boring to be lonely. So as humans, we're developed to be in communities. And because of that, we always want to have status within the community. We always want to be valued by the community. We don't want to be the annoying one, the one that everybody hates, the one that everybody wants to kick out. We just by our nature, we don't want to be that person. And so you will always have a level of judgment that you are afraid of. Okay, that you'll never completely get rid of that. But actually, as a little side note here, the way that I explain it to people is that these things exist on a spectrum. This is going totally off of the outline that I had for this video, but I think is an important thing to note, and I think you'll find it valuable. So I think all of our characteristics and whatnot, they in our our traits, they fall on a spectrum. Okay, so basically, let's say this spectrum here from left to right is fear of judgment. And let's say on the left side is like you don't care at all. You don't care at all about what other people think. And then on this side, you 100% care. It's all you think about. It's like you don't even care about anything about yourself. All you're thinking about is what other people think about you. Okay, that's one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum is you only think about yourself. You never care about what anybody else thinks of you. Okay, and what I would argue is that in my belief, my current belief system is that neither one of these are great, right? They like if you're on either end of this spectrum, it doesn't really serve you well. You don't you might this one you extract more value than you get, so people don't want to be around you. And then on this one, you on this side you are just making yourself miserable in order to please other people. So that is the spectrum, and I think that a lot of the people watching this video, if you're dealing with excessive blushing, I think many of you, if you're anything like me, but I think many of you just fall toward this end of the spectrum. You're just caring too much. Let's put a little thing in the middle here. So you're like way toward the side of caring too much about other people's opinions. And too much, like that wording, is an opinion of mine. But I say too much because I think you're at a point where it's not serving you to care so much about what other people are thinking about you. And the goal of watching these videos of if you want to become a coaching client of mine, becoming a coaching client of mine, is I want to help you develop more confidence in yourself and be able to move, just literally just move this dot over here somewhere where you start to care more about your own opinion of you than everybody else's opinion of you. You'll still care, but the goal is just to care a little bit less about what other people think of you. So that way you're just not thinking about it all the time and you don't depend on it for your well-being. Because when you're in that point, your well-being is out of your control, which is just not a fun place to be. And it's what's causing you to watch this video right now, is caring more about those other people's opinions. So that was just a little side note. It's just, we're way over here. We need to get over here. Okay, we need to care a little bit less about what other people think about us. But that being said, that was a complete side note. That is not the topic of this video. Let's just pretend that for this video, let's just pretend your fear of judgment is still there, right? Because it will still be there. It takes time to learn how to build confidence in yourself and not care as much about what a particular person says about you. So let's say you still care about what your boss thinks. Like that's your most important thing. Well, what I would say is that you are not speaking up about your imposter syndrome because you're probably worried that you think it's going to make you look worse. It's going to make you look incapable, and you want to be seen as capable of anything. I assume that's along the lines of why you're not speaking up about your imposter syndrome, is you want to impress them with your abilities and you want to act like you can do anything. You want to act like you are this unstoppable workaholic machine that can take on any task that is asked of them. At least that's my experience, and that's what I see from people that I talk to. And you think that and you might have the belief that if you speak up, if you say something, if you admit that you can't do something, that it's going to make you look worse. Okay. And I think that is simply a limiting belief. I think that's incorrect. I don't think that is necessarily true at all. There could be some situations in some work cultures that might be correct. There might be humans there. You might work for a boss who also thinks that. And at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, okay, do you want to continue living with this imposter syndrome, or do you want to start resolving the imposter syndrome and work for somebody who's more understanding, right? Sometimes our environment just isn't good for us. And sometimes we have to change that environment, which could mean a different job. But what I would argue is that most humans, most bosses, most workplaces, wherever you're going and feeling this imposter syndrome, most people would rather you be honest. They'd rather you be honest and see your effort than you try to be somebody you're not. In my experience, that has always been the case, is they will respect you more for your honesty. Okay. So if you're worried about your like speaking up about your imposter syndrome, and you think it's because you think it's going to have a negative impact on your status in the workplace or on your income, you're worried about not getting a promotion or whatever it is, I would challenge that belief. Okay. And so here are some things that I would recommend to remove that imposter syndrome when it's not serving you. Okay. So I do think one thing before I give these solutions to imposter syndrome is that I do think there is a time where imposter syndrome is okay. I think it's okay when it forces you to grow, and it's in your control. Okay, but when it's stressing you out so much that you're overwhelmed and you can't, like, you don't even want to move forward, you're too scared. That's the point where you need to do something about it. So here is the solutions that I would recommend for solving your imposter syndrome. Okay, so the first thing you should do, absolutely, is if you don't have clear expectations, start there. Ask for clear expectations. Okay, so just ask. Ask for clear expectations. That's the first thing you can do, to make sure that you understand what is actually expected of you. Because sometimes what will happen is in your head, you think that you need to be doing X, Y, Z and 1, 2, 3. And really all they expect is like X and Y. Maybe that's a terrible way of wording it, but essentially you think you need to do all this crazy stuff when in reality, your boss or your team or wherever you're experiencing the imposter syndrome, they really don't expect that much from you. And you're totally capable of delivering on that result. And you were just making it way more complicated in your head than really what was expected. That has happened to me so many times in school with things like presentations and projects. I thought they had to be these elaborate, long things when they assigned it. That's what it sounded like. And I addressed my concern. I spoke up and I said, hey, I don't think I can do this. And then all they said was, oh, you only have to do this. And I was like, oh, okay. And guess what? Imposter syndrome gone, stress dramatically reduced, and I felt way better, way more confident. And in fact, I actually was able to enjoy and feel good about completing that assignment. So make sure that you have very clear expectations. If you don't have clear expectations, start there. If you have clear expectations, or once you have done this, then the second thing that I would do is, well, I guess it depends on if you've done it before. So if you haven't done it before, what I would recommend doing is just practicing and then giving it your best shot. Okay, so get clear, like learn what you can do. Learn and try. Okay, so just learn what you can and then give it your best shot and try to meet those expectations. And what that will do is that will give you clarity on where your ability is. Now, there are times absolutely where you will fall short. Okay. And that's a part of life, but you just own up to it when that happens and you move on and you learn from it the next time. Okay. But once you are clear on your ability, then what you can do from there is speak up about the expectations being too high. And you want to lower the expectations to an expectation that you can meet. So in this case, set up a meeting with your boss or set up a meeting with whoever your team and tell them, hey, here's what I know I can do. I think I bit off a little more than I can chew here. I don't think I'm capable of delivering on XYZ, but I can do this and I will give it my best effort. Like if you say that, your imposter syndrome is gone, and they will also respect you for your honesty. Okay. Now if you originally said you could do something and you basically lied, and now you're saying you can't, they might be a little annoyed by that. So I recommend moving forward. If you've already done that, there's nothing you can do. It's too late. Just move forward. But if you can in the future, avoid volunteering for things that you don't think you're capable of, and don't make promises that you don't know if you can keep. I am so guilty of doing that, because I have this fear of judgment, and I want to be seen as somebody who's capable of doing anything. And I get myself into these situations where I simply bit off more than I could chew. So I have done the best that I can in the past couple of years to stop doing that, and to be open and honest upfront, willing to have that uncomfortable conversation to avoid this terrible feeling and then letting them down. Okay. It's like the worst choice to try to be somebody that you're not. Okay. So ask for clear expectations. That's the first thing I would do. If you have clear expectations, just give it a shot. Learn what you can and then give it a shot to see what your abilities are. And once you have a clear understanding of both, um, from then on, now you know what your ability is in terms of here's the work I am capable of. And if you feel like the expectations, like for the next assignment or the next time, are just too high, speak up, say something, get rid of this feeling. Like, be a little selfish here, but you're not even being selfish. You're just being honest. And again, people will respect you for that honesty more so than trying to be somebody that you're not, and then ultimately letting yourself down and letting the team down. So just speak up ahead of time so that you can get the resources and the help that you need. And you'll ultimately thrive better, and you'll also create just a better culture. And then you're not setting up expectations for the next time after that, because you don't want to create this cycle of constantly setting the bar higher and being stressed all the time, unless that's the thing you care about most and you just want to grow. But if you're here watching this video, then that's obviously, it's hurting you to be doing that. So if you've already done those things, sometimes there is a fourth thing that you can do, and that is to simply get better, and you can grow, and you can increase your ability to meet the expectations. So this one I recommend doing occasionally. I do recommend this honestly as often as you feel comfortable, and try to rise to as high of a level as you think you can with the amount of stress that you can handle. Okay. Because I think there is a point where you just get too overwhelmed. You are too stressed, and it doesn't, like, you almost get paralyzed because you're so anxious. You can't even do anything. But if there is a little anxiety, there's a little nerves that you feel, and a bit of stress, I think that's good. I think that's where growth is created. So there are times where I recommend people um, to lower the expectations, sure, but lower them to a point where you think you can meet them. Or I think there's times where it makes sense to almost create some imposter syndrome, where you step into a role that you aren't 100% sure you can do. You're like 80 or 90% sure you could do it, but there's a little bit of anxiety there that creates room for growth. Okay, so I think there is a case for almost creating some imposter syndrome. But again, if you're here watching this video, it's definitely just too much that you're dealing with in your life. So you definitely need to be more open and honest about your ability, and lower expectations so that you can meet those new expectations. And then, as a general rule of thumb moving forward, just be honest. Just be honest. Whenever somebody asks if you can do something, start with, I don't know. Let me, really look at it, and then I'll let you know when I can get this back to you, or whatever is acceptable in your workplace. But just be more honest about what you can actually deliver on. And a general rule of thumb that I learned at one of my jobs from just one of my coworkers, actually, and it stuck with me. And you've probably heard it. It's not groundbreaking, but it was under promise, over deliver. So he said, under promise, over deliver. If you underpromise, you will never experience imposter syndrome. If you promise a result that you absolutely know you are capable of, and then you go out and you give more effort and you do even better, you will, one, impress them, and two, never deal with imposter syndrome again. So that is a great phrase for people who deal with imposter syndrome to live by. Is this under promise, over deliver? Okay, so that's something I highly recommend you do. Now that is essentially how to solve imposter syndrome. I truly, at the end of the day, this comes from, like, the thing you're going to have to get over is this fear of judgment, ultimately. Okay. But even working with that fear of judgment right now, it helps to understand that I truly believe that your boss or your team will respect you more for speaking up and being honest about your current abilities, and that you don't know if you can meet the expectations, and that I will do my best and I will try. Or here's what I am capable of, and I will try my best to go above and beyond that. But I can't promise it. If you say those words, sure, there might for a second be some like, ooh, man, like, okay. But they will ultimately respect you for being open and honest, and you are now setting the bar more at a more manageable level for future projects as well. The more you try to act like somebody or not, you're going to feel like an imposter. You feel like an imposter because you're kind of being an imposter. You're putting on an image that you aren't sure you can sustain. So put on an image that you can sustain. Focus on, be open and honest about your current intentions and your current abilities. And just say, here's where I'm at. I will give it my best shot. And that is how you solve imposter syndrome. So really, you're just one or two tough conversations away, slightly uncomfortable conversations with your boss or your team away from solving your imposter syndrome. Okay. You just have to be willing to have that conversation, and you have to realize that it's not going to affect you as much as you think it is. And if it does, you have to ask yourself, is that a workplace you want to be in if they're not willing to work with you on how you're feeling and the abilities that you have? Because I mean, and ultimately, sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes you signed up for a role that you just couldn't keep up with. And there is a component to maintaining your sanity in terms of maybe biting the bullet, maybe looking for a different job, a role that you actually think you can keep up with, or asking for a different position or a different set of responsibilities at your current job. There are some major shifts that maybe some need to be made if this is something you're dealing with very frequently. But I would encourage that to be sort of the last resort. Before that, just be open and honest about where you're at and say, I would like to do better. I would like to learn. I would like to continue growing in this role, but here's where I'm at now. I would start there. And then use that as an opportunity to get better and rise to those original expectations. So that is how you solve imposter syndrome. I hope that really helped you. That is how I dealt with it, at least. And I think it's the answer to imposter syndrome. At the end of the day, if you feel imposter syndrome, it's because you're trying to be somebody that you're not. And you have to figure out, what am I telling people that I don't believe? And you stop doing that and you be honest about how you're feeling, what you're capable of, and what you're going to actually be able to deliver on. And then you do that and you feel good about it. You feel better about it. And it's just one uncomfortable conversation away. So go off, give that a try. Let me know if that helps you. If you got value from this video, please leave a like, please leave a review if you're listening on Spotify, and subscribe or follow for more videos to come. I will continuously put these videos out as long as you guys are finding them valuable. And that being said, if you are dealing with excessive blushing as well, in addition to this imposter syndrome, then and you want to get over it, you want to overcome that fear, embarrassment, anxiety around your blushing, then I make all these videos on YouTube, and on my Spotify for free for you to be able to do it on your own. If you want to do it faster, easier, and more enjoyable, there's always a link below these videos to learn more about my coaching program and book a call with me so we can talk about it. And I can help you come up with a plan to get past this ASAP. Okay. So with that being said, my name is Colin Clem. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.